I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Anu, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Expensify. She joined Expensify in 2015 and is the principal strategist for fraud prevention, audits, bank relations, and all other operational efforts for Expensify. Prior to becoming COO, she was the driving force behind the creation of the Expensify card, where she combined her vast knowledge of the world's financial networks with her deep technical background to guide development. Prior to leading Expensify's operations, Anu held vice president positions at Citibank and Marqeta, various engineering roles at Oracle, and received her MBA from Cornell. She is an avid traveler and devoted to her kettlebells. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and dog, Vito. This episode is sponsored by Expensify. Expensify is a payment super app that helps individuals and businesses around the world simplify the way they manage money. More than 12 million people use Expensify's free features, which include corporate cards, expense tracking, next day reimbursement, invoicing, bill pay, global reimbursement, and travel booking all in one app. I can tell you personally that we use Expensify, and it really helps with expense management in your business. To learn more about how Expensify can help save your time to focus on what really matters, check out use.expensify.com/spend management. Now, for those of you that are people that have gone on a journey yourself of change, of pivots, of maybe just not even understanding what makes you happy, this is the episode for you. My interview with Anu talks about her upbringing in India and her relationship that she had with her mom and the belief systems that were passed down generationally about women and working that set a course for Anu in driving herself to succeed. You will walk away from this podcast with a better understanding of how to assess your choices and how to experiment in making changes that may make you uncomfortable, but that ultimately lead to success. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. I think there's so many great takeaways that you're going to be able to use in your daily life. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And today I'm very excited to be interviewing Anu, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Expensify. Anu, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Expensify, and what that means is a very a fluid concept. Okay. At any given point in time, I consider my role to be taking on the most critical challenges that the company faces, and I've spanned across the organization. I've worked on product, I've worked on sales, I've worked on core operations from a payment processes standpoint, and right now I'm, helping out and doing a lot with our marketing strategy. So that's really true of a lot of roles at Expensify. Like, we wear a lot of hats, but mine is particularly fluid because I wasn't really hired into a specific role. So I've always kind of moved around and tried to work on the most critical thing for the company.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that probably keeps it interesting as well, right?
Yes, there's never a dull day.
Yeah. So great to have you. And would love to just go back into your background, kind of what led you to be doing what you do today. So maybe you can talk about where you grew up, what your parents did for when you were growing up and so forth.
For sure. So I come from a very humble, very middle-class Indian family. I'm the only daughter. And, so to give you an example of what I mean by very humble and very middle-class, when I was about 8 years old, we got our first refrigerator. Like, till then, we didn't even have a refrigerator. So we were very, I wouldn't say poor by Indian standards, but lower middle class.
Okay.
My family was very, especially my mom, was very much about if you want really good things in your life, like if you want to be, wealthy and have the finer things, then you need to work really hard for it because, I didn't quite have the same financial opportunities as all of my other peers.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea was always drilled into me. Like even today, I find it difficult to disassociate from it that, in large part, money buys you access and opportunities and in a sense, happiness, not all the way, but in a lot of ways. So most of my life, growing up years, I was a very studious, very hardworking kid. And I spent really every waking moment studying and planning where I was going to go to school and how I was going to turn my opportunities into cash.
Yeah.
I went to school for engineering. I did electronics engineering. And, there was really not much more method to that decision than, as an engineer, you get higher paying jobs. And that was what I was after. But I was also very analytically inclined. Things like math and analytical reasoning and scientific, like physics, chemistry, that sort of thing just came naturally to me. So that helped. So I went to school for engineering. I really didn't have any passion for it. At the time, the best jobs in India were all IT companies and software engineering jobs.
Yeah, so I did want to, so you grew up in India?
Correct.
And what part of India?
Chennai. It's in South India, not as well known as some other cities. But it's a metropolitan city. Sometimes I wished that I'd grown up in a smaller city because my husband did. And he has such amazing stories of neighbors that are super friendly and warm that I don't. Because Chennai, a big city in India is like New York, like it's impersonal and it's
right.
So
yeah. And just a couple other questions about, so what did your parents do? What was their jobs?
My dad was an accountant.
Okay.
And my mom, I don't know what you would call it, like a executive admin, I guess.
Okay.
That wasn't quite what they called it back in India. And she didn't do just admin work. She did a lot of clerical work, if you will, but
right.
Her job. My mom was very ambitious.
Yeah.
She kind of put herself through school and clawed her way into better jobs. And I'm a lot like my mom.
Yeah. And because I can imagine in India that was really hard, especially in her generation. What do you think drove her to do that?
I think my mom was the things that she instilled in me, she was after. She wanted a better life. Her family, my grandparents were even poorer. So she was one of 4 daughters.
Okay.
And, it still is to a large extent, but in her generation, it was absolutely true that parents really worried about how they were going to get their daughters married off. And it was a big deal because they'd have to spend all this money doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the planning in a household is based on, first, we have to save money for our daughter's marriage, and then we can put money towards their education.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea.
Yeah. And she hated that. It's not really it's not a dowry or anything. You just need to pay for the wedding.
Right.
That's the norm.
Well, and it's so elaborate, Indian weddings. So you really have to put a lot of money aside. I'm sure there's competition of how great your wedding is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did they do that for her?
They did. Yeah.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Sisters, so they did it 4 times.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just an overwhelming thing for them.
Right. So then all their money went toward future weddings versus things they needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. And then were they planning the same thing for you?
Not so much. When I was very young, my mom would say it sometimes.
Yeah.
But in an argument, you want, a pair of jeans for no reason. We have to save towards but, she hated this idea. And so she probably hated the idea of passing it on to me, but it's social conditioning that it probably came out a few times.
Right.
I never really worried about all that. And For the longest time, I didn't even care about dating or getting married or really any of it, because my eye was on the prize. Like I needed to get a job that would elevate my status, and I wanted to leave India and go to the United States. I wanted a different life for myself, and I was a very focused kid. So I just didn't have time for anything else in my mind.
Yeah. And I just find that it's so with your mom, so she was so against it. Did she ever talk about the process for her of how that happened and how she felt about it?
Yeah, she kind of resented the idea that a bride's family needed to pay for everything, especially because the culture was set in stone from back in the day where women didn't work. So you're kind of going from your father's house to your husband's house and you're being supported. And this was the thing they did because you were going to be dependent on this person. I'm not saying that was right, but that was
but that's the implication. Yeah.
But my mom worked and she actually made more money than my dad. So she resented that she needed to also do all these other things to get married, because why? Like she was an independent woman. So it grated her.
Yeah. Interesting. And so it's just funny. I think there was like a certain generation of women, because, my mom was similar in the fact that, she was always kind of had in my head, never depend on a man, or whatever. And I had a plaque over my bed that says, don't tell your daughter to marry a doctor or a lawyer, tell her to be one.
Amazing. Yeah.
Seems like a similar thing. And when you were saying that your mom talked about hard work, one of the things that I found with that in my own life is it was never enough. So how did she define hard work? And how do you define hard work? Because I think it's these belief systems that travel with us, and then we don't even know why we're working hard and what hard means and if it's ever enough, right?
Yes. I think that's a very astute observation, because I do think that one of my biggest issues in life is nothing is ever enough. And when I'm talking to my therapist, it's always this like ideal state of affairs which you can never achieve, like perfectionism that is actually making you miserable sometimes.
Right.
And that's my biggest demon. So my mom was a little bit, nothing was ever enough either, but I think my mom passed away when I was 25, but if she were here today, she would say, it was because she thought there was always something more that I was capable of, and she was trying to bring it out.
Right.
And at one point, I remember I became very obsessive. Like I already have an obsessive personality, and this fed that obsession or like that OCD-ness in my nature. And at one point, she was concerned about it. Like when I was in university, and if I didn't get the perfect grades, I would get so upset. And I didn't live at home. I actually went to university in North India. So I was very far away from home. And I think that distance kind of scared her. Like I'm not there, and she's kind of crazy about these grades, and all this news in the media at the time about how kids like couldn't get into IIT, would kill themselves, like
oh my goodness,
putting too much pressure on themselves. I'm sure that's still true, but I guess that was an emerging sort of awareness in society. So she kind of did freak out and would then constantly tell me to like, if you're going to get, I'd stress out about a grade, and she would say, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get a C? Like, that's okay. You should just be okay with that. And it really kind of freaked me out. I was like, wait, what? Like, you've never ever said that to me. I don't know how to take it seriously.
And did you ask her about it?
No, I would then joke like, oh, okay, what did you do with my mom? Like, this is the bloody thing you're saying to me.
And so is she the one who chose electrical engineering for you? Or?
No, not really. She just was sort of like, whatever, like there's this element of like, these are the things that successful kids do. right? Like become doctors or engineers. And within engineering, there were certain disciplines, as they called it, like computer science, electrical, like it went down like that. If you got good grades, you got computer science or electrical. And then if you didn't get good grades, and then if you didn't get good grades at all, you wouldn't get into an engineering school, like so on. And so it wasn't a very well thought out, like, what am I interested in decision other than like, this is the thing to do.
You are. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you ended up finishing in electrical engineering. Did you finish that degree? Okay.
I did that. And then, part of your third and fourth year, you can really select whatever subjects you want to study on top of your actual core major. Sort of similar to here, I bet. So I did a lot of coding related classes. And then I got a job at Oracle in India to be a software engineer. And I did that for 3.5 years. The first couple of years was really fun. It was sort of like, for lack of a better analogy, like solving puzzles.
Yeah.
But then it got a little dull because, Oracle's it's this huge machine and they have all these different applications. And then all those different applications are divided up into modules and you work on a module. So you don't even know like how this entire thing comes together. You don't know who's buying it, how they're using it. You're so far removed from anything real that my job didn't feel real. So I decided that I wanted, and at this point, again, like it was like, what is the next thing I can do that's going to set me up for success? Because I didn't really have any idea what I want. What I want to do was never a factor. Like I just didn't think like that.
Yeah.
So at the time, people generally graduated their university and went to do a master's in science, or they worked for a bit and then went to business school. And so I found myself in the latter bucket. So I applied to business school. And I wanted, like I said, I've always wanted to live in the United States and move from India. So this actually helped me do that. So that's what I did. And I went to Cornell for 2 years.
And you went to Cornell in the US?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you afford that?
Yeah, I took out a huge loan. It's a very cool story, actually. It was right before the credit crisis. So I was lucky and unlucky. Like I got my loans before the credit crisis because after it became really difficult.
Yeah.
But then I needed to get a job and get internships, and it was the midst of the crash. So that was not good.
Right.
But the school basically co-signed a loan for tuition, which was cool. But then I had to pay for a living, which was another, probably another 50% on top of the tuition.
Right.
And that was tough because I don't live here, so I couldn't get anything federally, I couldn't get a federal loan for that. A lot of people did.
Right.
I had to get a private loan. This guy that my mom worked with, I don't think she was close with him or anything, but he knew her. He lived here. And I don't know how she thought to reach out to him. And I don't know why he decided to take such a big gamble, but he co-signed a loan for me for my living expenses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. So I had a total loan of like $140,000.
Oh, wow.
An unimaginable amount of money coming from I don't know how
your mom too.
Yeah, I don't know how they took this huge gamble. And I don't know if I would do it again. I should, because it paid off, but it sounds so scary.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't think about how scary something is when you're doing it. And this guy, did you stay in touch with him?
I stayed in touch with him through school, through the time I was in business school. And then when I started working, you could prioritize your loan payments. I paid off the living expenses loan first. And I remember sending him an email when it was paid off. I don't think he was wealthy. He worked at an IT company. He was okay, but he wasn't so rich that he didn't care about the money. But he never once asked me, did you get a job? Are you paying this loan? He just completely trusted me, which was kind of insane. I've never
no idea how your mom knew him.
She knew him through work. He used to work
Oh,
Worked at this company called Ashok Leyland, which was like a big trucking vehicle company. She knew him through, I think he was an engineer, and she knew him through her work. I've never met him. I lived in the Bay Area. He was in the Bay Area. We never met. He was like so he just came out of nowhere like a guardian angel.
wow, that's amazing. Like just people like that show up in your life that are these, like, if it hadn't happened, it's so random.
Yeah.
And the fact that like they were just planted in your life for that moment and you haven't seen him.
Yeah. Synchronicity, right? The universe is helping you.
Yeah. So that was your first entrance into the US then.
Correct. Yeah.
So how old were you?
24.
Okay. And you said your mom passed away when you were 25.
Yeah. So maybe I was 23. I turned 25 in 2009 when I also graduated that year. And my mom passed that year in October.
And what did she pass of?
So my mom had renal failure, and she had it for a long time. So she had it when I was still in high school. Yeah, she was diagnosed when I was in high school. Then when I was in university, she had a kidney transplant from an external donor, and she was fine for a long time, 6 years or so. Then she had a relapse, and that relapse happened a year into me being at business school. And that was probably like that. And then her passing in the following years, probably the roughest years of my life.
Sure. Yeah.
But when I was in business school, they kind of didn't tell me that she was sick, but I could tell.
Like, how did you, like, I'm sure you would have been so torn to be here versus.
Yeah. So they just hid it from me. But, you have this instinct, like, your mom, like, it's just something is up. Like, something is off. And she was like, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to just chill because, there's a voluntary retirement scheme, they called it in India. Like they would pay you a bunch of money, give you life insurance, give you health insurance for life so that they could like cycle the workforce. And she took that. And that's when I knew, because my mom like would always say she would drop dead working. It was like, wait, that's not normal.
Right. And did you talk to her about it or you?
When I confronted her, they told me the truth. But then I had to, like, the whole thing was I had to get an internship. I had to follow through because if not, I had this huge load. What am I going to do? So I kind of followed through. And then I went home after my internship for a bit. And then I came back and she was okay. Through my second year, she was okay. She wasn't great, but she was a little sick. And then I got a job and then I went home for a little bit again and I came back and I joined and she passed. I was working at Citibank at the time. I really don't even know how I got that job because everyone was losing their job at Citibank. So it's all, just like happened. And then for 6 months, I went home. So I grew up with my my mom was around, but she worked, and my grandmom pretty much raised me, my mom's mom. And when my mom passed, she was just so broken about it. So I couldn't just leave her and come back immediately. So I stayed there 6 months and I asked Citi if I could work out of their India office. And they were really cool about it.
Wow.
So, yeah, which is also like
that isn't even like that's a different time era for that to happen.
Yeah, in 2009/10. So I stayed for 6 months. It was basically a rotation program. Every 6 months, you went to a new team for 3 cycles. So my first cycle I spent in India, and then I came back, and then I continued. And I didn't love my job at Citi, but I was always so grateful that they gave me those 6 months, which was so crucial to my family.
So with your mom getting sick, did you notice any of her beliefs shift at all? Or did she say anything different to you or any advice she gave you?
The only like she was still very much like, no, you need to get your internship. No, you need to get a good job. Like, please don't come back here. Like I'm fine. Like she was still very much about that. But the one thing that did change was suddenly she was all like, you need to get married. And it was just like, till that point in time, she would constantly say that men were a distraction and I should just be focused. And suddenly she was like, it's like, I'm not even dating anyone. I can like skip 5 steps now.
Right.
But that's the only thing that changed. Suddenly she became very worried that I don't know what the worry was, that I will not get married or I wouldn't have your support.
Yeah, that if she wasn't there, like,
Yeah.
that you had somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting, right?
Yeah. It's still very much like, or like my grandmom had this history where her mom passed early on in life, and then she got married and she had a pretty unhappy marriage. So my mom must have associated it like, oh no, like if you don't have your mother, like you're going to make a decision or people are going to make decisions for you. But it was 3 generations later, so obviously not the same thing.
But it is like, so I just put out a book called Disconnect to Connect, and it's very much about these generational belief systems and patterns.
Yeah.
And everyone you're making a decision based on the way your mom felt, because that's what's kind of pushing your head, and she's making a decision 3 generations.
It's true.
Back. And it's just interesting how that passes unless you're intentional to say, is that really my existence right now? Is this truly what I'm living, or am I living somebody else's story?
I agree. Yeah. And it takes a bit of maturity, and you have experience under your belt before you're able to have that level of objectivity and distance.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, I never questioned any of it. Like I never questioned that this is not the path I wanted, or what do I even want? Like what do you want? What is the truth is so buried under all your conditioning that it's hard to get to.
Yeah. So how did you go on that journey?
So, I worked at Citibank for 4 years. I moved to the Bay Area. I met my now husband at the time I was dating him. We moved. I worked at this company called Marqeta. But the common thread for me through my life, I should say, not even just in the United States or in these jobs, was the sense of like, I want to do this. And when I do this, I'm going to be set up for success and I'm going to be so happy.
Yeah.
You get there and it's just like, oh, now I need to do that. Like, at the point, it's like scale this mountain and then you'll be happy. But then, oh shit, there's another one. Oh shit, there's another one. And each one's getting steeper. And it's like this hamster wheel that's going faster and faster.
Yes.
So I kind of couldn't, I reached this point, I think, I know precisely when the last straw that broke the camel's back was in like some point in 2015, where I just felt like I need to do something different because this isn't working. Like I've done this for so many years and it's not any different no matter what goals I reach. So I did this insane thing, which if you watch Seinfeld, you'll know immediately what I mean, is the Costanza Experiment. Because Costanza in the show is always like getting into stupid skirmishes, right?
Right.
In one episode, he says, every instinct of mine is just wrong.
Yeah. So he's going to do the opposite. Yeah.
The opposite. So I was like, oh, I'll do that. Like for real, that was my thinking. Like I was like, every instinct of mine to follow something is not getting me where I need to go. So I need to do something totally against my instincts. And my instincts were all, every job should pay you a little bit more than the previous job. Every job should have a better title.
Right.
And you should be treated a certain way by everybody around you. These were the things that were important to me. The work itself was just irrelevant.
Right.
So I decided to shift that. So I actually, like I said, there was no role at Expensify that was set up. I just approached David, who I was working with on a project, but I was on the Marqeta side and he was trying to get a card program for an idea of his. That's how I knew him. But, and I don't, if I think about it for real, like, I don't even think there was any specific reason why him. He just, something in me, like an instinct was like, let's just pursue this. So it was kind of like going with the flow. So I approached him and I said, oh, you could hire me and I can run this project for you and I can do whatever else is critical at the company. Like I can figure it out. That was the pitch. And he was like, I don't know what he had, what need the company had at that point, what he was thinking, and he went for it. Like they ran an interview, but he hired me. And then it was basically, I took something like a $40,000 pay cut, and I had no title. And all of that is why I did it. Like I was just like, this is about the work I'm going to do, and nothing else is actually going to fit the bill. So I'm going to try something new. So, and then I gave myself 2 years. I said, for 2 years, I'm going to focus on doing good work that I can finish and feel proud of, and nothing else. And I can't pretend that during that time, I just kind of forgot about all the things that really mattered to me.
Oh, yeah.
It's constant.
Well, it's also, it's embedded in your neural channels. Like that's how you think, and you have to keep being aware of when you're thinking it.
Absolutely. So it would come to me all the time. I would get very sad. It'd be like my career is just going in the reverse direction. And then I'd have to be like, no, it's a 2-year experiment. Can't think of this. Like, let's focus. It didn't even take 2 years, though. Like, it maybe took a year and a half. And I realized that was the best job I ever had. Like, I felt good. Like, Mondays I would wake up and I was raring to go. I'd never, ever felt that way. And, it's in large part the way the organization worked as well. Like, there were no walls. Anybody could pick up anything. No one was building little fiefdoms and cutting you out. All that was critical to success. But at the same time, it was me, because I had chosen to tune into what mattered, which I didn't even know mattered, as opposed to keep on listening to the same channel, which was telling me to do XYZ. And after doing XYZ, I wasn't finding happiness.
And how much did you hear your mom's voice in that?
That's a really good question. And it feels wrong to say this, but I didn't hear her voice in that at all.
Wow.
Because that's actually, and until you ask that question, I've never thought of it. Like, I'm just reacting in the moment. Yeah. Because I don't think she would have approved of it. She would have said, like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, you're supposed to move forward, not backward. Yeah. And in all fairness, that's the world she knew. Like, taking a little gamble wasn't a luxury she had. So, it turned out to be life-changing for me. So, and I have often lost my way since then. Like, but now I know the formula. So when it's sort of like when you lose weight and then you gain it back, you're like, no, but I know how to lose it because I did it before, and you just repeat it. It's sort of like that. Like, over and over again, when I've kind of gone back to my old ways, for lack of a better word, and start like obsessing about things, I'm able to course correct myself to be like, what this is about is how you feel at the end of the day, not about how you think you'll feel 4 months from now, because that is not promised. And you don't even know, like, you don't have a crystal ball. So I keep trying to remind myself, like, the work is what matters. If you're not enjoying what you're doing every day, and if you're not impactful in doing that, then nothing is going to make you feel happy, like no amount of titles or money. And it's really paid off for me. Like, I feel it is the formula for success for me. And I think anybody that'll listen, I'll tell them the same thing. But when you do that, I think it brings out the best in you. Like, you do your best work, you show up with such authenticity that your people are drawn to you. They want you to give your 2 cents on what they're doing, and you just become a magnet. And that's really how you build influence. It's how you grow. It's how you make more money. Like, all of it is just
it comes. Your purpose will protect you.
It sounds.
You have to serve in order to do. Yes. And so it's interesting, because I've questioned this about myself too, because similar path. And I talk about that in my book, strong mother's voice in my head all the time, and always feeling like, like, I was good enough today, and then I had to start over the next day, and, to keep accomplishing. And so definitely went down the same path. And even what I do now is, much about purpose and passion and what makes me happy and serving and that sort of thing. But I've often wondered if I hadn't achieved those titles prior to this, So like, I agree with your statement of I am much happier every day living for my purpose or whatever. But like when you're that type of person and driven for titles and the next level, and
Yeah.
when you get certain levels and you're like, and same thing, it's like I keep getting those levels and I'm like, why am I not happy? This is what I want.
Yeah.
I'm still not happy. What's the next thing?
Yeah.
And that whole recalibration, but I do have gratitude that I got those titles because I don't know that I could have let go of it. Like
Yes.
that's the part, like, I don't know if I could have done it at 25. Like when like if you hadn't gone through that path, could you do it? And it's hard to know looking back because you know the way that you got there. But there is something, for me, when I talk about passion and purpose and, there is always that, like, I don't want to make someone feel like like I just never, tried for it.
Yeah.
Like, or whatever. So it's
I totally agree.
Trying to decipher that as far as advice to others, because you want to make sure your passion is aligned.
Yeah.
But you can't, when you're young, like you do have this thing in your head about titles and what that means. So I don't know what you think about it.
I think that's a very, very good point. Like, did we have the luxury of being able to take a step back?
Yeah.
And would we be able to take a step back and do the things that we do now if we didn't build up the base? Like, I think that's a very pertinent question. And I actually, my thinking on that is, I think if I had to go back in time, knowing what I know now, I don't think I would make any different decision.
Yeah.
I think I would still follow this path because I still care a lot about money. Like I have a lot more today than before. I still want more. I wear that proudly. Like I'm material and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. and it's good to say it. Like what if those things drive you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like when you walk onto a plane and you turn left and they'll never ever take your bag and try to check it in because you're in first class. Like that feels good.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna lie. So I like it. But so I think I would have made the same decisions. I would have still chosen a line of work that paid well. Like I wouldn't have decided to become a war journalist or something. I respect it. It's not for me. So And you're absolutely right. Like, I think no matter how you approach this, you have to, like, working hard is your only way because there's no shortcuts. Like at some point you hit a block, you can only scam your way through life so much.
Right.
Even for the most slick person. And I'm not slick at all. So I couldn't scam my way at all.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing though, is to kind of just stay tuned into what you're hoping to feel and whether or not this thing is going to help you or is going to help you. Like when I worked at Citibank, what I wanted to experience was building, improving things materially. That was not going to happen there.
Right.
So it's an unrealistic expectation, right? Like, so if the only thing I would do differently, I think is like I took a huge chance on myself going to business school. I would do that again. Yeah. But I didn't take that much of a chance on myself when I was working at Citibank because I had to be on everything has its purpose, but like I had to maintain my visa status. So I couldn't just go work for a small company that could turn around and say, oh, we're downsizing, we're going to lay you off. I would lose my status and have to go back home.
Right.
Or go back to India. So I was kind of weighing all those risks and making a decision based on that. But I think if I wanted to do something that materially moved the needle, I can't work at a big bank. So just kind of tuning into like what outcomes do you want every day is probably the only thing I would do differently. I just didn't even, I couldn't have put all those words together, but like, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I feel now
that's important. Yeah.
There's an elevated amount. Maybe it feels that way to me. Who knows? Like it feels like there's an elevated social consciousness around all of this now that didn't exist before, which is amazing. I'm so jealous of the newer generation.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the only advice I would give somebody, like, just tune into what you really want and make a plan for getting that, because otherwise you're just going to end up achieving things for the sake of it, but never ever feeling a sense of satisfaction.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to do the Citibank jobs in order, as long as you have that long-term plan,
Exactly.
you know? And so I think that's the important part of knowing, like you said, like, how is it that I want to feel? I remember not being able to answer that question.
Yeah.
I was, having my annual reviews, getting promoted.
Yeah.
There'd be like 95% awesome on my evaluation. I'd focus on the 5% that they were saying I needed to improve. And I remember sitting with a friend of mine who was my manager. So we had a close relationship, and it was like a stellar review, and I still wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And she's like, kind of paused and said, what would make you happy? And I was probably, I'm guessing 29 at this point. No, 26, 25, 26. And I remember looking at her and being like, I just can't answer that question.
Yeah.
I thought I could because, I was very driven like you on titles and getting to the next level and accomplishing, and it wasn't making me happy. And so I think when she asked me that question, I was very like stopped in my tracks of like, I don't understand why I'm not happy. Like,
yeah. Because if you got 100% stellar review, it would be like, wait, the raise was so small.
Yeah, exactly.
The raise was too small. There was no promotion in title. It's always something.
Always. Yeah. And so I think that's like this lifelong question to always be asking yourself, because I think it shifts as well through your life.
Definitely.
Where you're younger and think you know what it is. And then as you get older, that definitely shifts based on your family circumstances or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it becomes more and more about self-actualization, which is really difficult because now you're like improving on perfection, hopefully.
But also just that awareness of what, has been driving you that you thought would make you happy isn't making you happy. But one of the things, and I think that's important in your story too, that I try to get across in these journeys, is that you can't run away either. So like everything you're talking about, you did very strategic pivots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love how you had guardrails around the 2 years.
Yeah.
You're like, I'll give myself 2 years. If I don't like this, I'm going back to the way.
Yeah.
And when you've got the exit, it's easier to take the risk, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Makes everything easier because it's not I work with a career, what do I call, life coach, career coach.
Mm-hmm.
You should have her on your podcast. She's fantastic. I'll give you her details after. But she always says it's not a life sentence. Like, it's not a life sentence. So try to look at it with amusement, and curiosity. And I try to bring that, even if you're agitated about something at work, it really calms you down to then be like, this is not a life sentence. Whoa, what's happening here? Like, this is real amusing or real curious or real weird. Like when you start observing it like that. Yeah. I think it kind of de-stresses you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Where you can separate from yourself.
Yeah.
And assess it. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So now it's evolved into a title. Everything that you do at Expensify. So when did that happen?
2021. And it was like everything else in my life that was kind of a step up for me. It came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Everything that you really worked for and came as expected never really brought me all that much joy. But so I was probably like, I'd probably done COVID kind of just like, it was a confusing time for everybody. So I kind of lost my direction a little bit. And then that was the time I started working with my coach, Amy, who I was telling you about. And I remember one session she asked me like, okay, so when was the last time you felt very happy and satisfied with what you were doing? And I remembered that was the Costanza Experiment time. So I kind of went back to that. And, like, this is why I said, like, every time I go back to it, I feel the same sense of just space and freedom. Yeah. And like satisfaction.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue, the company as a whole made a decision to make me the COO because we were going public later that year. So we were kind of setting up our executive team. And that was amazing. Like it was, I mean, you don't want to chase titles, but it feels great.
Yeah. Especially for it to come that way where people know it was a recognition. It wasn't something.
I didn't seek it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great, but it's validating. Like even that gets old. Like I love it, but I also am like it's normalized now.
Right.
What I care the most about, the market's been really rough. And we've been working very hard as a company, just sort of because we are a word of mouth led, product led growth company in the small business space. So we have a lot of our work cut out for us to sort of weather the storm. So I wake up and go to sleep and dream about how I'm going to do that. And I'm very fired up about it, very passionate about it. I love it. Like I was saying yesterday, I find myself on the regular clocking 11 to 12 hours, but it's because I don't want to log off because I have so much left to do that I find incredibly driving. So I think it still comes down to the same thing. Like, what is it you're doing? What do you think it's going to accomplish? And is it fun for you to do it? Are you learning something new? And I'm a big believer in like bite-sized milestones. Like if I've never had a 5-year plan.
Right.
I'm sort of like in the next 6 months, if I do this, I'm going to that'll be really great. And that's what I'm going to work towards. That's the longest I really plan.
Yeah.
And, it's a tough time, but it's also super exciting because we're like building a new app in order to sort of go after the market in a much bigger way.
Yeah.
We're working a lot on the way that we grow, which we've never had to do in the past. So, I'm learning a lot and doing a lot, and it's incredible.
Well, and I think kind of listening to you, there was an awareness that came up for me, through my career, because I would get a role like that was really exciting, solving the puzzle. And then once you solve it, it's maintenance.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm not good in the maintenance.
Yes, same.
Good in the puzzle. And so like, that's what gets me excited. It seems like so frustrating at the time and you're working. And then when you like solve it, like 6 months in, you're like, well, this isn't the fun stuff for me. Yeah. But other people love the maintenance.
Yeah.
And so it is important to like figure out where your passions are and where your strengths are.
Yeah.
And, because you will find sometimes when you think you're unhappy, it's really not about where you're working, or it's like you've got to do a pivot or a shift in what you're doing.
The alignment of what you enjoy and the work is the most, at Expensify, this is my 8th year and I haven't had a single year where there's not been a new challenge.
Right.
For better or for worse, it's been the most.
You work for a very visionary CEO. So.
It's true.
I mean, just Expensicon itself. Yeah. Everyone keeps asking, like, what was it? I can't even explain it. I'm like, it was just such an experience. But someone that could have envisioned that and create that kind of community and experience for people. I mean, it's a very different company.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. So I have a couple rapid fire questions that I like to end with. And so pick a category. So the category is either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Spiritual.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Everyone always picks family and friends. So that's cool.
It's easy.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want.
A calm, like a sense of balance. Because everything I do, I'm either very obsessive or I'm totally bored.
Yeah, exactly. Get you. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep.
I'm very I'm very instinct driven.
Mm-hmm.
Like if something doesn't feel good, I know instantly and I won't do it. Like I believe that the universe has a plan for me and is working with me. And that is a belief I have grounded in no logic. And I like it. I want to keep it.
Yeah. It's trusting your intuition.
Yeah.
Right? Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have.
I don't have a scarcity mindset. And I like that. I think that this world is huge and there's so much for everybody. And if I have something, I want to share it. And I don't think by sharing it, I'm diminishing my role. I'm only elevating it.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Kind of orthogonal to the not having scarcity mindset. I'm very competitive. And and the reason I don't like it is because it goes against my belief that the world is open and everyone can have what they want.
Yeah.
But I was raised to be super competitive. Yeah. So I have to like really struggle against it. So I look forward to the day when my immediate response won't be one of, oh shit, like I need to do better.
Yeah.
Rather, oh my God, that's great for you. Like I'd like to that.
Yeah, that it's not about you. It's about, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's such a common human nature thing to happen. But like, again, with the awareness of it, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, most people are not aware of it. So, is there anything as we close up that you want to make sure people walk away with from your story or that we didn't cover today?
The biggest reason I do speaking engagements, that I show up in public and talk about my story, is because I've always wished that 15 to 20 years ago, I knew what I know today, that you can tune into what you love and you can be about the hard work and the impact that you have. And that will show you the way to success. And all this fear-based, you know, when I was in school, there's a lot of fear-based coaching, like you have one shot and you better like really show up and do this interview and nail it, because if not, there are so many people that are Indian and engineers. And it's like, you know, that sort of like fear-based talk, I think restricts a lot of us, and we have a lot of negative self-talk. And my message to everyone out there, but especially women, is to like tune into that and do it less and less. It's not possible to do it zero because we just made this way or something, but you can, I think if you can do great things, and that's just true for everybody. If you just tune into your capabilities and tune out of the negative self-talk. And if Sheryl Sandberg's done it to her level and I've done it to my level, anyone can do it. So that's the message I hope everybody will take away.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Yes, of course.
So many nuggets that I think will be helpful to others.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
And now for my mindful moments with this interview that I had with Anu. There were so many great points that Anu had in her story, and you probably heard a lot of them that I was pausing on and really going deeper in, of starting out with her background growing up in India and really having that understanding of where women's place were and how the culture believed that women would get married off and their husbands would be given the responsibility for them. And this was something that her mom had a belief system that wanted to break that. And because of that, was very, very strong in her beliefs and really training Anu that if you want good things, you have to work really hard. And we talked about, what does working really hard mean? And I think a lot of times we don't define what working hard means. And we put this expectation on ourselves that nobody else is putting on us. Or we might be looking out to see if there's disappointment or we're not doing enough, instead of realizing that we are enough and defining what is it that working hard means. What is it that we want to accomplish? And what are the things that we need to do each day to achieve that, rather than feeling like we've got to accomplish everything at once. And so this really led to a discussion about how she chose her career, and really that it was somewhat chosen for her, that this wasn't really something she had a passion for. It was that in India that she was so intelligent that she was actually accepted into the electronic engineering program. And it kind of went in that order, not really asking herself what she was passionate about or what she would want to do. And this was something to please everyone else, also please herself. She wanted to make sure that she made money and had the titles that she wanted in the future. And so when we have that goal or that vision in our head, Anu and I talked about that I had a very similar situation where I was trying to get out of my situation. So you believe that money's the thing that's going to make you happy. And what she started realizing was that no matter what title she got or how much money she made, that it was one of those things where you got there and then there was another mountain to climb, that you can never really truly get to happiness. And so defining happiness is a really important thing, and really understanding who we are. And if you haven't listened to my podcast with Dr. Keith Bernardo, you might want to go back to that podcast, because we talked about who are you with a capital S, meaning self. And one of the things that reminded me of that interview was our discussion about what she really liked and what she didn't like when she went through engineering. And one of the things that she liked was solving puzzles, as she put it. But the work would get dull once it was broken up, or she couldn't see the bigger picture or how it was all coming together. And when she went to business school, I mean, that was a whole story of its own, of the risk taking that she took during that time. But going through her next stages in career, she was really, again, after the money, after the title, but never questioned about what she wanted and whether this was actually solving for her capital S of self, of solving puzzles and being curious. That's what made her happy. And a lot of times we don't allow for ourselves to even assess if we're happy, right? So when we take that question of what makes us happy, or how do we even define success, maybe starting there, it's really important that we understand that, because we can never reach happiness if we haven't defined what that looks like. And maybe that's a long-term play. And so we need to think about what small things we need to get there. And I loved her way of getting there, of finally saying, I'm made it through all of these rings. I have gotten all these titles. I'm still not happy. And watching a Seinfeld show with the Costanza experiment of like, every instinct I have is wrong, so I'm going to do the opposite. Just go against your grain. And what I also liked is she put guardrails around it. And she said, for the next 2 years, I'm not going to worry about money. I'm not going to worry about title. I just want projects that make me happy. And when those thoughts would come up of, I'm not making enough money, I don't have the title I want, she would be aware enough that it was coming up to push those aside and remind herself, I'm only doing this for 2 years, and what I'm doing is making me happy. And so it's really important that we think about that as we're testing new things. And she said, in less than 2 years, she already was happier, and she no longer was losing herself, that she found ways to be excited about work again. And it's not that she doesn't care about money, but she was really making sure that she was doing the things that were going to help her find fulfillment in her workday. And that was solving puzzles again. And solving puzzles again, which was a string from engineering, meant that it was all these different projects she was doing at Expensify and getting into different types of work and expanding her mind and pushing herself. That was what was fulfilling her. And so it's not that she lost she wanted to make money, but as she said, a few years later, they end up giving her the title she wants. They end up giving her the money without her actually asking for it. And that was a really nice thing to get. But when we're living our purpose, we have to trust that our purpose will support us. And we've always got to have guardrails. That are there points where we have to tap out of it, because we aren't getting what we want out of it, that can be, or we do need to make more money, whatever that is. But make sure we put those benchmarks in place so that we can go through that testing process and see what it feels like and see who we really are with a capital S and tune into what you love. And as she said, when you do that, it will show you success. And when you've got that fear-based talk happening in your head, be aware of it, find out what you can do less of and how you can stop that from happening. And instead, really tune into what is great about yourself and make sure that you are finding happiness there. So I hope you enjoyed this. So many of these concepts were reflected in my book, Disconnect to Connect. Tap into the power within you to create the life you desire. So if you want to learn about more about generational patterns, how you break these habits, definitely pick up that book. That's going to help you on that journey. And again, I want to thank Expensify for sponsoring this podcast. Again, they are a payment super app that helps individuals and businesses around the world simplify the way they manage money. More than 12 million people use Expensify's free features, which include corporate cards, expense tracking, next day reimbursement, invoicing, bill pay, global reimbursement, and travel booking. If you want to learn more, check out use.expensify.com/spend management. Thank you very much. I hope that you were able to take some actionable things away from this podcast and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues that you think would help them as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.